I knew something was catastrophically wrong the moment my wife stood up during her parents' annual holiday gathering and called everyone's attention. The house was loud and warm, filled with overlapping conversations, clinking glasses, the rich smell of roasted meat and fresh fir branches. Her family was everywhere, nieces running through the hallway playing tag, her father Benjamin laughing too loudly at his own joke about the traffic on I-95, her mother Patricia fussing over plates and napkins no one had asked for. The dining room of their Philadelphia townhouse was decorated exactly as it had been every year since I'd joined this family. White lights strung along the crown molding. A massive pine tree in the corner, weighted down with 3 generations of ornaments. Children's artwork taped to the refrigerator. Everything warm. Everything traditional. Everything designed to make you feel like you belonged. I'd been sitting at the far end of the table, nursing my second glass of wine and half listening to her uncle's story about his fishing trip to the Outer Banks. My mind was elsewhere, thinking about the quarterly reports I needed to review before the new year, the investor meeting scheduled for January 15th, the expansion plans for our Chicago office. Then Sarah walked back to the table and placed a thin manila folder directly in front of me. She didn't slide it gently. She dropped it with a sharp crack against the wood, like she wanted the sound to cut through the room and silence every conversation at once. "Go ahead," she said, her voice calm but sharp as broken glass. "Open it. You deserve to know. Everyone deserves to know." People smiled, assuming it was something symbolic or sentimental. A card. A heartfelt letter. Maybe a pregnancy announcement for a second child. Her cousin Rachel raised a glass in premature celebration. Someone else clapped. Patricia beamed from across the room, probably assuming her daughter was about to share good news. I opened the folder with steady hands, still clueless. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Clinical language. Medical logos. A lab name I recognized instantly. GeneTech Solutions, the same facility where I'd taken my annual physical just 2 months earlier. Then my eyes landed on the numbers, printed in bold 14-point font, as if to ensure there could be no misreading. Probability of paternity, 0%. Tested individual, Colin James Morrison. Child, Dylan James Morrison. I felt the blood drain from my hands before it reached my face. My fingers went numb. The paper seemed to glow under the dining room chandelier. Our son, 4 years old, asleep upstairs in the guest bedroom after tearing through wrapping paper all afternoon, his small hands sticky with chocolate and excitement. The boy who called me Dad, who climbed onto my shoulders demanding higher, higher, who trusted me with his entire world, wasn't biologically mine. The room fell silent in stages, like a wave moving outward from where I sat. Conversations faded. Chairs stopped scraping against hardwood. Even the children playing in the hallway seemed to freeze mid-laugh. Sarah leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms with deliberate slowness, and took a long, theatrical sip of wine. She was wearing the emerald dress I'd bought her for her birthday. Her hair was done professionally. She'd planned this moment down to the smallest detail. "I think it's time everyone stops pretending," she said, her voice carrying through the sudden silence. "I haven't been in love with him for years. Not really. Not the way a wife should love her husband." Her words landed one by one, carefully chosen, like she'd rehearsed them in front of a mirror. Maybe she had. She explained, openly, casually, as if discussing the weather, that my business partner had given her what I couldn't. Security beyond what my startup provided. Emotional attention while I worked 80-hour weeks. A future that felt guaranteed rather than speculative. She said the child wasn't a mistake or an accident born of passion. He was a solution. A calculated way to guarantee long-term financial stability, while I poured my life into building Morrison and Foster Technologies from the ground up. Her father Benjamin stared at the table, his face draining of color. Her mother Patricia started crying, quiet sobs that she tried to muffle with her napkin. Someone, I think it was her brother Marcus, ushered the children out of the room. I could hear them protesting in the hallway, asking why they had to leave, why the adults looked so serious. Sarah didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed energized by the attention. She explained that she'd waited for the company to grow from 3 employees working out of a converted warehouse in Newark to 47 spread across 3 cities. Waited for the valuation to peak. Our Series B funding had just closed at $47 million 3 months earlier. Waited until I was legally established as Dylan's father, my name permanently etched on his birth certificate, 2 years of established paternity, making any challenge nearly impossible. Then she planned to divorce me, take half of everything including my equity stake, secure long-term child support based on my projected earnings, and walk away protected by laws designed to shield mothers and children. She said it like it was already done, like she was reading from a script she'd finalized months ago. "You were so focused on your company," she said, her tone almost pitying. "So obsessed with proving yourself to investors, to your parents, to everyone who doubted you could build something meaningful. You never even noticed what was happening in your own home, with your own wife." What she expected was tears, rage, panic, maybe a public breakdown that would make me look unstable in front of witnesses who would later testify about my emotional volatility during custody proceedings. Instead, I felt perfectly crystalline calm, because she was 6 months too late. I looked at her across the wreckage of her parents' holiday table and said quietly, barely above a whisper, "Check your email, Sarah." That was the first visible crack in her carefully constructed composure. She frowned, confused, her hand already moving instinctively toward her phone on the table. She probably expected a desperate message, something pleading and emotional that she could screenshot and hand to her lawyer as evidence of harassment or instability. Her face changed as she scrolled through her inbox. Then changed again, the color draining away. Then again, her eyes widening in something approaching horror. Divorce filings, evidence logs with timestamps, financial timelines showing asset movement, recorded conversations transcribed and notarized, screenshots organized by date and relevance, affidavits from witnesses, a full legal strategy already submitted to Philadelphia County Court and time-stamped at 8:47 p.m., 23 minutes before she'd stood up to make her announcement. Her hand started shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She didn't look up when I stood, pushing my chair back with calm deliberation. "I've known everything," I said, my voice steady and clear so everyone in the room could hear. "Long before tonight. For 6 months, actually. You didn't trap me, Sarah. You underestimated me. And that was your first mistake. Assuming I was too busy, too trusting, too stupid to see what was happening." I walked out through the front door while her family sat frozen in the wreckage she'd created, their holiday ruined, their image of her shattered. The cold December air hit my face like a slap, sharp and clarifying. By the time she processed what had happened and tried to call her attorney, the filings were already active in the court system. It all started 6 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning in late June, when our son had a medical scare at his preschool in Montclair. Nothing life-threatening, just enough to justify blood work. He'd been unusually lethargic, running a persistent low-grade fever that wouldn't break. The school nurse had called me first because Sarah was suddenly too busy with what she claimed was a client crisis. She worked in marketing for a pharmaceutical company, or so she said. 2 days later, the pediatrician, Dr. Helena Rodriguez, asked to see me in person rather than discussing results over the phone. That should have been my first warning. She was careful with her words, choosing each one with the precision of someone who'd delivered difficult news many times before. She explained that Dylan was perfectly healthy, just a routine virus, nothing to worry about. Then she mentioned blood types, almost casually. Genetic incompatibility. Basic Mendelian genetics. Not an accusation, just a medical fact that didn't align with the family history I'd provided. "Sometimes these things reveal unexpected information about family genetics," she said gently. "I'm obligated to mention when there are inconsistencies. What you do with that information is your decision." I didn't argue. I didn't ask clarifying questions. I thanked her and left. I went straight from her office to a private lab in Morristown I found through a discreet Google search. The kind of place that doesn't ask questions and delivers results in sealed envelopes. The results confirmed what my instincts already knew, what some deep part of my brain had perhaps suspected for months but refused to consciously acknowledge. Probability of paternity, 0%. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside my wife in our king-sized bed in our renovated Craftsman home, listening to her breathe steadily in the darkness, and replayed every moment I'd ignored. Every legal paper she'd rushed me through signing, claiming they were routine or time-sensitive. Every time she'd pushed me deeper into work, encouraging late nights at the office, telling me how proud she was of my dedication while secretly grateful I was occupied elsewhere. Every time she'd insisted on keeping finances separate for simplicity, despite my suggestions that we consolidate accounts like most married couples. The next morning, I hired a lawyer. For 6 months, I played my role perfectly. Loving husband who brought home flowers on Fridays. Devoted father who never missed Dylan's soccer practices at the park. Oblivious partner who trusted his wife completely and never questioned where she went during her girls' nights that became increasingly frequent. Meanwhile, I documented everything with systematic precision. I installed monitoring software on our shared computer, completely legal since I owned it. I kept meticulous records of my time with Dylan, photographing every breakfast I made, every bedtime story I read, every doctor's appointment I attended. I saved every text message, every email, every credit card statement showing patterns of behavior. Unexpectedly, help came from inside her own family. Her younger sister Emma, who'd always been the more grounded one, found messages on Sarah's laptop one evening when she was staying with us during a work trip to New York. Screenshots of conversations. Plans spelled out in cold, calculated detail. Dates. Numbers. Financial projections. Custody strategies. Emma was horrified. She'd always looked up to Sarah, defended her, made excuses for her self-centered behavior. But this crossed a line she couldn't ignore. She gave me everything, copying files to a USB drive that she handed me one morning at a coffee shop in downtown Newark, her hands shaking as she passed it across the table. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I had no idea she was capable of something like this. Dylan deserves better. You deserve better." By the time Sarah chose her moment to strike, publicly, dramatically, in front of her entire family during the most sacred gathering of their year, she walked straight into a trap she didn't know existed. She thought the law would automatically protect her. She'd read articles about maternal rights, consulted with divorce attorneys who'd given her generalized advice about custody battles. She'd probably been told that as the biological mother, as the primary caregiver during the day while I worked, as the woman in the relationship, she held every advantage. She never considered that preparation beats betrayal every single time. The hardest part of those 6 months wasn't the paperwork or the strategic waiting or the meetings with my attorney. It was watching Sarah with Dylan every single day and knowing two contradictory truths at once. She loved him. She genuinely did. She packed his lunches with carefully cut sandwiches and fruit. She read him bedtime stories with different voices for each character. She kissed his scraped knees and held him when thunderstorms frightened him awake at night. Anyone watching from the outside would have seen a devoted mother who prioritized her son above everything else. But I'd seen the messages. I knew that behind closed doors, in texts to my business partner Edward Foster, she referred to Dylan as leverage. That she'd told Foster, point blank, in a message timestamped at 11:47 p.m. on March 15th, that putting my name on the birth certificate was the smartest financial decision I've ever made. Secures minimum 18 years of payments regardless of how the marriage ends. That sentence alone changed everything for me. Changed how I saw her. Changed my entire mission. That's when I understood I wasn't just protecting a company or a bank account or my pride. I was protecting a child. My child, in every way that actually mattered. Because biology aside, I was Dylan's father in the only ways that count. I was there when he learned to walk, taking shaky steps across our living room floor at 13 months. I was there when he woke up screaming from nightmares, convinced monsters lived in his closet. I was the one who cheered the loudest at preschool plays where he played a tree and forgot all his lines. I knew his favorite bedtime story, his irrational fear of the vacuum cleaner, the specific way he liked his toast cut. And I wasn't going to let him become a bargaining chip in someone else's exit strategy. By December, my attorney Thomas Harrison and I were ready. 6 months of evidence, organized into 3-inch binders with color-coded tabs. Financial trails showing Sarah quietly diverting money into accounts I wasn't supposed to know about. Proof she'd consulted with multiple divorce attorneys in 3 different states long before I suspected anything, getting free consultations to learn the optimal strategy. Screenshots from Emma confirming the affair and the long-term plan, including dates and locations of meetings with Foster. Detailed records of my role in Dylan's daily life. Photographs, videos, witness statements from his teachers and pediatrician. And Emma herself, prepared to testify despite the family devastation it would cause. Harrison told me we had an exceptionally strong case, but only if Sarah made the first move. We needed her to reveal intent publicly. Needed her to demonstrate in front of witnesses that this was planned and calculated rather than emotional or reactive. She did it for us at Christmas dinner, performing her revelation like a rehearsed monologue, never suspecting she was being recorded by the phone in my jacket pocket. That night, from a hotel room near the Philadelphia airport that I'd booked 3 weeks earlier, I gave Harrison the signal via a single-word text. Now. Within the hour, Everything was filed: divorce petition, fraud allegations, emergency custody motion, requests for supervised visitation only. By sunrise, the case was officially alive in the Philadelphia County Court system, assigned a docket number, placed on Judge Carolyn Alvarez's calendar. Sarah still thought she was in control, that her dramatic revelation had secured the advantage. She wasn't. She'd given me everything I needed. The temporary custody hearing took place on January 8th, just after New Year's. Sarah walked into the courtroom looking exhausted, like she'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. Her attorney was polished and expensive, Douglas Whitmore, known for winning ugly custody battles through aggressive tactics. But I noticed the hesitation in his voice as soon as Harrison began our presentation, a subtle uncertainty that suggested he was encountering evidence his client hadn't disclosed. The judge, Carolyn Alvarez, listened quietly from the bench. She was known throughout Philadelphia family court for zero tolerance when children are treated like assets or weapons. She reviewed every document Harrison submitted with surgical focus, occasionally making notes, her face unreadable. When Whitmore tried the usual argument, routine maternal bonding, stability of keeping primary custody with the mother, Judge Alvarez stopped him mid-sentence with a raised hand. "Counselor," she said, her tone sharp, "have you actually read the messages your client wrote?" "Because I have. Every single one." Whitmore hesitated, flipping through his files. "Your Honor, I've reviewed summaries prepared by—" "That's not what I asked." The courtroom went silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Harrison took over, and he was devastating. He laid out the medical discovery that started everything: Dr. Rodriguez's carefully worded observation, my decision to pursue independent testing, the results that shattered my understanding of my family. The DNA results, presented with chain of custody documentation. The timeline of the affair with Foster corroborated by hotel receipts, restaurant charges, text message metadata. Then the messages themselves. The room changed when those appeared on the screen Harrison had set up. Projected in 18-point font for everyone to read. Texts where Sarah calculated child support based on projected earnings. If the Series C closes at $80 million like they're projecting, that's minimum $6,000 per month for 18 years. Math works out to over $1.2 million total. Not bad for 4 years of marriage. Messages where she described pregnancy as insurance. It locks him in regardless of what happens with us. Can't exactly walk away from a kid. One message in particular made Judge Alvarez remove her reading glasses and stare directly at Sarah. A plan to reveal Dylan's true paternity years later, timed specifically to cause maximum emotional damage during divorce proceedings. Thinking I'll tell him the truth around year 7 or 8. Let him bond completely, then pull the rug out. He'll still owe support, but will be emotionally destroyed. Perfect leverage. A child, my child, reduced to a weapon and a revenue stream. When Sarah was asked to explain herself, she stumbled. Claimed exaggeration. Venting. Misinterpretation. Said those messages were taken out of context, written during moments of anger, never meant to reflect her true intentions. Which specific context, Judge Alvarez asked dryly, makes treating a child as a financial instrument acceptable? Sarah had no answer. Then Emma testified, and that sealed everything. She spoke through tears, her voice breaking as she detailed what she'd seen, what she'd heard, what her sister had admitted when she thought no one would challenge her. She described finding the messages, her horror at reading them, her agonizing decision to betray her sister to protect her nephew. "My sister is smart," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "She's calculating. She planned every step of this. And I need to be clear, she loves Dylan. But she loves what he represents more. Security. Control. Winning." When I asked her directly whether Dylan's happiness mattered more than her plan, she couldn't answer me. Harrison let that statement hang in the air before asking his final question. "In your opinion, based on everything you've witnessed, are your sister's actions in Dylan's best interest?" Emma looked directly at Sarah, tears streaming down her face. "No. She treated him like an investment portfolio, like leverage, and Dylan deserves better than that." After a 20-minute recess, Judge Alvarez returned with her ruling already written, pages of legal reasoning that would become part of permanent record. Primary custody was granted to me, effective immediately. Sarah received supervised visitation only, 2 hours per week in a monitored facility, with a licensed social worker present. Mandatory counseling to address what the judge termed instrumentalization of the child. Strict communication limits, All contact about Dylan had to go through a court-appointed coordinator. Any violation would result in immediate suspension of visitation rights. Financially, the marriage was ruled to have been built on fraudulent intent from the moment of conception. No alimony. Minimal settlement. She kept her car and personal possessions, nothing more. No child support owed by me, since Dylan wasn't biologically mine, and the paternity had been established through deception. Foster was ordered to undergo paternity testing and assume legal responsibility, including retroactive child support for 4 years. Years of planning collapsed in 3 hours. Sarah tried to speak to me afterward in the courthouse hallway, tears streaking her face, mascara running. She grabbed my arm, apologizing, begging for something amicable, suggesting we could work out a private arrangement that would be better for everyone, especially Dylan. I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No sympathy. I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked away. I left the courthouse and drove straight to Emma's apartment to pick up Dylan. He ran to me like he always did, arms wide, shouting "Daddy," with pure joy. I held him longer than usual, feeling his small body against mine, his heartbeat steady and trusting. Emma watched us from the doorway, crying quietly, relief and grief mixing on her face. "You saved him," she whispered, "from becoming what she tried to make him. You saved him." Life slowly settled into new rhythms. Dylan adapted better than I expected, though he asked questions I had to answer carefully. Why wasn't Mommy living with us anymore? Why could he only see her at the special building with the nice lady watching? I never poisoned his view of his mother. That wasn't the point. I told him that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, that people need time to work on being better, that love was complicated, but his happiness was what mattered most. 3 months later, custody became permanent after Sarah violated visitation rules twice, showing up intoxicated once, attempting to take Dylan from the facility before the supervised session ended another time. 6 months after that, Foster's paternity was confirmed. He was ordered to pay child support directly to me for Dylan's care. He also lost his partnership stake in Morrison and Foster Technologies as part of the settlement. The company was renamed Morrison and Associates. I bought out his equity at the minimum valuation our operating agreement allowed. A year later, I met someone new at a technology conference in Boston. Michelle was a software engineer, brilliant and genuine, with no interest in my company's valuation or my bank account. She saw Dylan as a child who needed stability and kindness, not an opportunity. We took things slowly, carefully, the way people do when trust has been shattered and needs to be rebuilt from foundation stones. I ran into Sarah once after everything was final, a grocery store aisle in Montclair, of all mundane places. She was buying organic vegetables and yogurt. She looked tired but more settled. Smaller somehow, less sharp-edged. She apologized again, this time without excuses or justifications. "I was so focused on winning," she said quietly. "On securing everything, on protecting myself, that I forgot what actually mattered. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know." I believed she meant it. Believed she'd done enough therapy to understand what she'd done, how she'd hurt people, how she'd nearly damaged her son permanently. But apologies don't rewrite history. Don't undo years of calculation and deception. That night, I read Dylan his favorite book, Where the Wild Things Are, for probably the 100th time. He fell asleep holding my hand, his breathing deep and peaceful, the way he always had. I sat there longer than necessary in his dinosaur-themed bedroom, watching him breathe, listening to the house settle around us. Sarah had been right about one thing, perhaps the only thing. Dylan was the most important thing in my life. The most precious. The reason everything else mattered. She just never understood how far I'd go to protect him. How much I was willing to sacrifice, endure, strategize, and fight to keep him safe. Not from the world. From her. And I'd won. Not because I was smarter or richer or more connected, but because I loved him more than I loved winning. That made all the difference. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.